Welcome to Live, Lead, Legacy, the podcast where visionary leaders come to ignite inspiration, sharpen skills, and make a lasting impact. I'm your host, Carlos Luna, an executive leader in the C-suite of the insurance industry. Each week, we bring you deep, insightful conversations with exceptional leaders who aren't just excelling in their fields. They're transforming industries, strengthening communities, and shaping future generations. Whether you're leading a team, sparking change in your community, or guiding your family to greatness, this is your space to grow, learn, and to lead with intention. So grab a seat, lean in, and let's embark on this journey of leadership excellence together. This is Live, Lead, Legacy, where life and leadership intersect. Joining us today is Mr. Jim Altman, a distinguished chief financial officer whose career is defined by excellence in financial strategy and transformative leadership. With a proven track record of turning challenges into opportunities, Jim has been instrumental in driving sustainable growth for multi-million-dollar companies and their revenue across numerous industries. Jim's impressive journey includes impactful roles at Promise Keepers, Howell Construction, and Sky Blue Builders, where he showcased his ability to optimize performance and lead teams through complex business transformations. Beyond his corporate roles, Jim also serves as an adjunct faculty member at Metropolitan State University in Denver, Colorado, where he's shaping the next generation of business leaders through education and mentorship. But there's more to Jim's story. In addition to his corporate and academic accomplishments, Jim has also built an outstanding career as a football referee. With years of experience on the field, he's not only officiated games with precision and integrity, but also took on the role of mentor, guiding young referees and instilling in them the values of leadership, discipline, and teamwork. His ability to teach and lead in high-pressure situations extends far beyond the gridiron, making him a role model in every sense of the word. A dynamic problem solver with the passion for financial integrity and innovation, Jim thrives on translating big-picture business goals into actionable strategy. His commitment to ethics and collaboration have made him a trusted leader in the boardroom, in the classroom, and on the football field. Today, we'll delve into Jim's extraordinary career, his insights on navigating today's evolving business landscape, and his dedication to fostering professional growth and leadership. So let's dive in. Welcome to the Live Legacy podcast, Jim.
Thank you, Carlos. I appreciate being here.
Yeah, man, of course. It's an honor to have you with us, a man of your experience, your expertise, and your sense of humor, man. I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
I'll tell you, sir, it's really humbling to be asked to do this. Listening to that introduction, I told you I wanted to meet that guy. I really appreciate that. And today you can see I wore my Dunder Mifflin hoodie in honor of doing this because, I feel like in the last couple of years, my life has been, I want to be more contrasting in my life. Here's a show that's all about poor leadership. And I really feel like we're going to talk about good leadership. What a great way to kind of have that contrast and juxtapose great leadership against poor leadership. So
I love it, man. I love it. The Office is one of my favorite all-time shows. It's hilarious, the leadership concepts that go there and just the ridiculousness, right, that ensues throughout the show is pretty hilarious.
Yeah, that's
so
fun.
You and I met a number of years back. We had the privilege of working at an organization that made a tremendous impact, probably globally, by the name of Promise Keepers, the men's ministry organization. They grew to, heights of popularity, probably in the late 90s, early 2000s. And you and I had the privilege of serving there in a professional capacity. What are some of your best memories there?
I think I was trying to think back to this. I think you and I met around 2000 or so. So we've probably known each other 25 years. I had my first foray into Promise Keeper world when I volunteered for the Indianapolis event in 1994. 94, honestly, was the first year that the organization broke out to stadium events across the United States. Prior to that, they were kind of localized to Boulder, Colorado. I had a friend who I've known for a while. I think he was in my Sunday school class, and he said, "Hey, we're having an event. Do you want to come and help out in the accounting room?" And I said, "Sure." I don't know what that meant, but I said, "Sure." And that was the spring of 94. In May of that year, we went to what was then the RCA Hoosier Dome in Indianapolis and served in the money room, the accounting room. It's where when they took an offering, that's where we counted the offering. It's where we, all this stuff. It's kind of fun.
Yep.
When we were doing retail stuff, it's, where we kept tabs on everything that was supposed to go in and out of the registers. And it was quite an operation. And, we tweaked that over the years. The then controller says, I got to find a place for you, come and serve with us. And roll forward 2 years ago, my wife and I came out and visited, interviewed in February of 96. And then in May of 1996, I got on a plane in Indianapolis in a rainstorm and flew out here for my first day. And honestly, I didn't have a place to stay that night.
Oh, wow.
I was trusting God to provide that to me. Two things that happened. It was just really cool. This is kind of confirmation of how things work out for you. One of the coworkers I'd met in Indianapolis, he said, "Hey, you can stay with us a couple of days." So he lived out in Littleton or Morrison. And so I went home with him. And then a friend of mine who I knew from college in Indiana, he was my RA my freshman year, my RA my freshman year. And he said, "Hey, we have the gift of hospitality. So we'd like for you to, if you want to, you can stay with us." And that was down at Castle Rock until, you sell your house in Indiana and then come out. And so we did that. Funny thing about that story, it is, he says, "We have the gift of hospitality, but it was at a price of $50 a week." So I thought, his hospitality comes with a price. So that was kind of funny. That's what, I love those guys to death. I got to tell you another story about this whole thing, Carlos. So when we bought a house in Anderson, Indiana, and within months, several people decided they didn't like the house. There was something they didn't like about the builder. They put up signs. We're unhappy homeowners. Ask us why. And Anderson is a depressed market. General Motors is on its way out of town. To try and sell a house at this time was incredible. We had to advertise for a long time a lady, a single mom who wanted to get out and buy her own house. She'd been just single for a while. Not a good story prior to. And she says, "Look, I don't have a down payment to go on a traditional mortgage." And I said, "Okay." And I prayed about it. And the Lord really revealed to Joy and I, my wife, that we should sell this house to her on a contract basis and then have her have an out where she can refinance it down the road. She never missed a payment to us. I know it's risky. She never missed a payment to us. And within a year, she had it refinanced. And I always think back that house was such a blessing to us for 2 years. And then he provided an opportunity for the single mom to, be in a nice neighborhood and take, for her kids. And I don't know, that's so cool to me. This is one of my favorite stories about our move out here.
Well, I'll tell you what, I mean, it sounds like a number of things had to happen in order for you to be able to work there, which they did take place, which, gosh, it's got to feel good, right? When you feel like you're where you're supposed to be when you're supposed to be there, which is great.
Yeah.
One of the things that I remember about Promise Keepers were the regular prayer meetings that we had. And so they were pretty inspirational to me, having grown up in the church, having grown up in a charismatic Foursquare environment, getting exposure to slightly different approach to prayer, slightly different approach to ministry was pretty cool. I also thought it was awesome when we could see up and coming artists. I remember I met, what was that young girl's name? Stacy Orico, maybe? I can't remember what her last name was.
Dina Rico's daughter. Yeah.
Yeah. And so we met her there at the prayer meeting. She sang some worship songs. And then a couple months later, we were hearing her all over the radio, right? Which was pretty cool.
Yeah.
So that was exciting. The other thing that I really loved about Promise Keepers was just the environment that was created, at least within the accounting department, right? I can't speak for any of the other departments because I didn't work there. For those people that are watching that don't know me all that well, I actually did spend a small stint of my career in the accounting department. And I really loved the culture that was cultivated within that team, which was really freeing, right? In terms of certainly your faith, but also it created an environment where people could really produce their very best work product. Talk to me about how you went through developing that type of culture. What inspired you to do that? And what were some of the challenges that you came across in pulling together, a team that could ultimately foster that type of culture?
I was thinking about this recently, and I've been a leader, supervisor since 1994 ish. So what, 30, coming up on 31 years. I started a firm that was based in Indianapolis, and we had some offices in Fairmount, Indiana, and I ran that office. And so I had a chance, I think, really to dive in. And that was really my first foray into really good one-on-one leadership with people. And I always wanted to be the type of leader, honestly, Carlos, that I never had previously in my career. And that was, really wanted to be empowering. I wanted to be one who elicits, puts vision into people, because I felt like, and this is a concept we talk about now, is putting vision into people. But it was pretty foreign in 1994, honestly. There wasn't a lot of books out there written yet about it. And then I harkened back to, in 1979, I started my very first job. I made $1.91 an hour at a McDonald's in Berea, Ohio.
$1.91?
Oh, come on. Can you believe that?
That must have been when milk was 5 cents.
Man, I was happy to have that. So I remember my mom worked in the same franchise of a franchisee at a different store, and she knew the manager and such. And so I kind of got a little bit of help getting in the door, but everybody needs a little help once in a while, right? So I remember they advertised after about 9 months a role for a student crew chief. And I said, wow, I want to do that. And I remember to this day, Carlos, this crusty old guy telling me, he said, Jim, you will never amount to any kind of manager ever in your career.
Oh,
and, when you tell a 17, 16, 17-year-old that, they're just devastating words. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely, man.
Wow. The part of me, the very high fleshly part of me wants to go. I know he's long been dead, but I want to say, look, dude, look what I'm doing now.
Yes, sir.
I want you to eat your words. But I had that thought in the back of my head every single time that I started a new role as a leader. And when I went to work at this CPA firm, that was in the back of my mind. I want to be that type of person who instills and inspires vision for people. And I want to be able to pull the team together and bring some cohesiveness. And, after I came to Promise Keepers, that controller left to go back to Oregon. And that was within a month or two. He just had an opportunity, and he was from Oregon. And so there we were left without a leadership or any kind of leadership in the accounting department. We had a brand new CFO. He was awesome, quite honestly. And he's still a good friend of mine. He lives down on Parker. And I occasionally talk to him once in a while. Just a phenomenal leader himself. And within the accounting department, there was a struggle, I think, between myself and one of the other up-and-comer guys. It was probably a couple of years younger than me or whatever. He didn't have the CPA license. I had it. I didn't have an MBA. He had that. He had a lot more tenure in the organization. He kind of pushed back on some stuff, and I found myself leading initially the accounts payable team, and it was a lot larger than when you worked there. And we all sat in a room, and I found a way to get these people to pull together. And unbeknownst to me, people were watching that. And when they named a controller, they put me in charge of the group. I think that set the stage for the rest of my career and a chance to lead people. And again, starting with that idea of how to inspire vision, how do you get people on the same page? How do you look and say, what is the main goal of what we're trying to do here? Is it just accounting? And really, it isn't. We're here we're a customer service part of the organization, and it's with any organization. I work for a construction firm now. My team is all about customer service. We're not just doing accounting. We're all about that. So how do we get that vision in every single person? And obviously, I think when people start to feel that kind of that tighten around them, and if it's not something they resonate with, they're going to find a new place. And you just replace people with people like yourself that had a real vision. I know where you came from when you joined us is that you had high customer service, and I think that's how you fit right in with us, because that was one of your core values, is to serve and do all that. I wanted to empower. We had really excellent people. If you remember, everybody had degrees. I don't remember if you remember Diane. She had an MBA, and just super knowledgeable people. And when you set people to free to do their job, and I know this now, I didn't know this then, but leadership is all about getting results through other people.
Oh yeah.
And I think I employed that thought or concept back in the day, even though I didn't know about it. It's getting results through other people. And that doesn't mean you're kind of, a taskmaster on the backs and you're doing stuff, but you're inspiring vision and you're inspiring, hey, keep this company, its goal in front of you. As you know, we met some incredible volunteers across the United States, some people that I still am in contact with. There's a couple times I went to Albuquerque and I got a chance to meet up with one of the volunteers that I met on one of our events. Really, really good guy. Him and I are, we're connected on Facebook and stuff, but we'll share some stuff every once in a while. But you met some great people across the U.S., right?
You really did, yeah.
Such passion for the things that we were doing.
Yeah.
And they really caught that vision. And here's the one thing that I'll finish this question. It was real easy to sell that story of, hey, we're customer service. This is what this organization is about. We're trying to make men better husbands and fathers. And we really drove that message in with the staff. Once they saw our volunteers saying that, it was real easy for me as their leader to reinforce that. I don't know. I just wanted to create a culture of trust, of empowerment, of innovation and how we were doing things. And honestly, I don't think these concepts really were at the forefront of leadership techniques back in the early or late 90s, early 2000s. I think we just survived. And, everybody's capitalized on this stuff now and said, this is what good leadership looks like. And heck, I didn't know what I was doing. I just was saying, this is how I want to be led. So, hey, let's do this like this. And that's how we got there, and the other thing is, good leaders are made by excellent followers. And, as that team was absolutely amazing.
Well, it's so appropriate for you to talk about the people, right, of the organization. For me, my experience there was really enriched, not so much by the practice of accounting or the practice of really anything having to do with business, but by the people. We had so many fun times there, so many good times, so many, laughs. Unfortunately, some of them at my expense, Jim. But it was the people. We were family there. We were okay with laughing with one another, at one another, and that really produced some great outcomes, big picture, right?
Oh yeah.
I remember a practical joke that you played on me once as a young man. Gosh, I must have been in my early to mid 20s, maybe. I can't recall exactly, but recently married, going on my first road trip. And I remember asking for permission to see if I could bring my wife. And what ensued after that, Jim?
Those are people that eventually hear this and know me. They'll know this about me. I have a God-given ability to just come up with stuff on the fly. And that's just, I don't know what it was. I had just a knack for doing it. It was just so much fun. And I remember when you asked me that, and all of a sudden in my head pops this thing. We're a ministry. So just a little bit of context. We're a ministry. And I think, we want people to be singularly focused and stuff. And so I said, no, Carlos, that'd be fine. Except there's two conditions. That one of those things, because, as a ministry, we want people to be singularly focused. The Apostle Paul said, hey, don't have your mindset compromise. It's Jim's paraphrase of whatever he said in one of the epistles. And he really resonated with single people because they didn't have to worry about, satisfying a mate or whatever, having a dual focus. So I told you, I think at the time, yeah, I think your wife's going to either have to stay with a female roommate or you're going to have to sign a form that says you will refrain from marital relationships. And I could not believe I was saying this stuff. I was laughing, and inside I was laughing so hard. And I will tell you, if you remember, you were standing at this cube, and I was looking at you. Everybody in the department heard this, and they started to gather behind you because they said, "Okay, what craziness is Altman's gonna say?" And so I remember the conversation went like this. You go, "Oh, really? Wow." And I said, so I just kept it going. I knew if I looked up at the team,
by this.
If I looked up at the team, dude, I would have said, I would have just busted out laughing, but I kept a straight, as you know, I kept a straight face. And one of those, I think this is one of my favorite stories to tell of all times. I told it to my recent team recently, and they said to me, just parenthetically, they said, You did not say that. And I said, I'll introduce you to the guy, and he'll tell you this story's true. So I think, you said, well, where do you think I could get that form at? And so, hey, Jim's mind goes off the rails again, right? So if you remember, Roberta down in HR was kind of a fun playing person, and first name that pops into my head, go downstairs, see Roberta. She's got the form. And I know that the team behind you had to be dying. And again, I dare not look at them. And I think I let you go for 15 minutes or so, and you were convinced that you were going to get down and ask for that form. Could you imagine if you would have went down and asked for that? That would have been one of the most all-time funniest practical jokes I would have ever pulled on somebody. Oh, that was so funny.
Well, I was really conflicted by it because obviously, the whole reason you go on a trip, Jim, is to have marital relations, number one. And here you were throwing a block in that. So it was hilarious. It was a lot of fun. But, it was one of those things where it felt like family. It felt like you could have fun. You could laugh. You could enjoy the day-to-day. And the outcome, again, was just great relationships, great work product. As you're talking about leadership, of course, you can't talk about Promise Keepers without talking about Coach Mack, founder of Promise Keepers and renowned University of Colorado coach, right? And he was a polarizing figure. I mean, to be quite frank, a lot of people really, really loved Coach Mack, not just within Promise Keepers, but globally. Then there were some folks that really saw him to be the wrong type of motivator for some reason. I'm not sure why the polarization happened. What are some of your memories of Coach Mack, and what are your thoughts on that? I don't want you to put yourself in a compromising situation here, but gosh, man, he reached his heights of coaching in, 1990 when CU won the national championship. He goes on to start this huge movement. And then there are some individuals that feel like maybe the depth just isn't there. What are your thoughts on Coach Mack?
Yeah, I have mixed emotions about it. I'm thankful forever for having the experience of Promise Keepers. I never thought that I was one of Mack's favorite people. I was told on more than one occasion, and not through him, but some of the leadership team, that the accounting team, finance team were the most unholy people ever because we dealt with money. And honestly, Carlos, as a young guy, I'm looking at that now, as somebody more advanced in my years. That's just kind of like a little bit of not being sure about yourself. And, from my standpoint and even from their standpoint, just, when you start to justify your role within an organization, it's because you have a little bit of confidence issue or something like that. I remember one of my first encounters with Mack was that first summer when my house was trying to sell. And he said to me, well, Jim, I would seriously doubt your calling to this ministry or else your house would have sold right away. And honestly, it's not the kind of the theology that I grew up with. I was more, you said, you were in a Foursquare gospel church. I was in a more, I don't know, holiness church. I don't know how to describe it. More conservative in the theology. funny thing, I don't know if you don't mind me telling this story, but when I went to school at the denomination's kind of main headquarters school in Indiana, and of course, the church did not believe in dancing or anything like that, and we were supposed to only date girls who went to that church denomination. My dad went to school there back in the 50s, played football there, so I kind of had that mentality. Maybe I should just go here. A lot of my friends are going there. But the funny thing is that, there was a rule against dancing, and a lot of people had dances off campus. And so many of us said that the church didn't believe in premarital sex because it might lead to dancing. So that was kind of one of the funny comments that we always made. So you get an idea, more conservative in its theology.
Yeah.
I know the church is divided on speaking in tongues or whatever. Man, my church, absolutely not. That's just not something we do. That was, for back when, Paul, or back when Peter was first, had that big sermon and 3,000 people were saved. My concept, is coming into this place was, hey, there's people with a lot of freedoms and liberalities in this church. I wasn't used to going to an event and having dinner afterwards and somebody of my team or somebody within the team having alcohol, because again, my denomination strictly, forbidden and all that stuff. And so here's Mack telling me, hey, I got to doubt your calling. And I'm thinking, I was thinking I was 32 at the time, and I'm really thinking about this. And I go, wow, did I make a big mistake trying to sell my house? That I quit my job that I was secure in Indiana, and it really threw me for a loop. Knowing what I know now, and I look at the life of the Apostle Paul, he did not have an easy life after his conversion. He was shipwrecked and beaten. He was left for dead. He was stoned. He was snake bitten. All those things are pretty heavy things, right? Eventually beheaded by Nero near 100 AD or something like that. But you know that his life was pretty difficult. So that was my first encounter, and I don't think that my church upbringing really taught me a lot about proper theology, apologetics for sure, which, I think that is, once you have your apologetics down, you're going to know from a good theology, you're going to have a good basis for that.
Sure.
I think, Mack was responsible for my termination in 2003. We had a discussion. He was saying, hey, I got 10 people in a room praying one way, or 9 people in a room praying one way, one person praying differently. And he goes, what do you think about that? And I didn't know what he was after. I said, well, I'm not sure what you're after on, Bill. So why don't you, give me a little more insight as to where you're thinking? And he said, well, that one person shuts down the prayers of the other 9. He said, what do you think about that? I think I was in my late 30s then, close to 40. And I said, well, Bill, I don't think that God really needs us to tell him what to do. I think, prayer is for us to align our hearts with God in our heads. And really, it's not for us to tell him and align him with us. And he kind of abruptly closed the meeting. And 4 days later, I was out the door, which was fine, because it set so many great things in my life. And I think when I look at stuff, I had made so many changes earlier in my career. And I just said, okay, I'm gonna let God take over the reins of my career. I'm gonna let him, when he needs to move me on, he's gonna move me on. I knew, and I know today, that God is sovereign over my career development. And I've had some hard forced changes in my career. I think as a CFO, because sometimes you don't align with the CFO, CEO, and I've had that experience in past roles. Or a parent company, you got a different philosophy. But I think those are times when God has moved me on to the very next thing. And I can see where he's allowed me to kind of have some time to recharge and recover. And then, even now when I think about my role, it's just, this is like the best place I've ever been at Sky Blue. The management team there is amazing. The leadership is great. And it's got all those things that I really like about an organization: empowerment, collaboration, just, good stuff. And I know that's a lot more than what you ask about my encounters with Mack, but I look at that time where he released me, Carlos, and I know without a shadow of a doubt that was God working in my life and moving me to some steps where he wanted to train and teach me and refine me and get my skill set better so that I could have an impact on other organizations over my career. And I can look back and see that I've had a tremendous impact, more intangibly than tangibly, but there were some great things we accomplished as a group. But intangibly, I think I've impacted more than I ever thought I would. That makes sense.
It makes perfect sense. These conversations just seem to be, gosh, a bit jarring, if I may. I mean, those are difficult conversations to have, particularly when you overlap your faith with your profession, because your faith, you're very emotional about. Your faith, you hold very near and dear to your heart. If somebody called me a bad CEO, I probably wouldn't be that offended by it, right? Everybody has their own opinion, their own perspective on how business should be conducted. All right, it's your opinion. Great, move on. On the other hand, if somebody would tell me, gosh, you're not where God wants you to be today, or you're not, walking in the fullness that God has for you right now, then that's going to give me a lot more pause, right? Because I hold my spiritual condition and my spiritual direction a lot closer to my heart than I do my job, if that makes any sense. So given those facts, Jim, was there anything that from this experience that you had at Promise Keepers all the way through, through your departure, your separation, how did that shape your ongoing approach to leadership? Did it at all? It sounds like you certainly found some great places to land thereafter, but you as a leader, was there something that you picked up from that experience that you say, yeah, that experience definitely taught me to approach this situation differently?
Yeah, no doubt, Carlos. The things that I think about are this. One, and I want to revisit something about that team that we worked together on. I believe that you have to have ultimate trust as much as you can within that group. That group has to trust the leader implicitly. He or she has to be transparent. They have to be able to be want something that you can count on their words and that their actions are going to meet those words. And it has to be fun. And, we spend so much time working together. I think as a leader, cultivating those relationships are really, really super important. What I found, I think, and this is not just, Mack and his leadership, because he's working with the senior team. I feel like that part of the disconnect there is if those guys had known me more personally, maybe they would have had a different conclusion about me. Maybe they would not have seen me as rebellious as I came across, right? And I know, honestly, I think what led up to that conversation, he probably could be labeled as, hey, Altman is being somewhat rebellious in his thought process. And I get that. I was in my mid-30s. What did I know? So I think as I walked out of that situation, one of the things that I've really tried to be strong on is that trust component. It has to be there. People have to know that you care. That whole adage about people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care is absolutely true, especially for a leader. At the previous place I was at a forklift dealer here in Denver, I had a team of 28. Now, I will tell you that I tried to connect and touch base with people, every single person on that team, about every day or every other day. Because you know what? I didn't want to be in a position where we were going to have to put somebody in a PIP or move on from them. I did not want to be in a position where I did not know them and making the same incorrect conclusions about them as was made about me. And I being engaged with your team. So that's one of the big things I learned. The trust component is so, so big. I never say a family because, you always have that drunk uncle that might show up to a wedding, but I do say it's a community, because we all do our own thing, right? There may be some things that people do in the community that you don't like, but, you tolerate it. You want to be a good neighbor. And, I look at the management team as the HOA board, and if somebody's out of line, they're going to get a notice from HOA board. And so in that community, let's work together for the greater good of the community. Let me just parenthetically tell you a story here recently. In my neighborhood, there was a group of people that wanted to collect blankets and coats and hats and stuff for the homeless population here in Denver because of, our below zero temps that we've been faced with the last couple of days.
Sure.
And I saw, community members come together. I know we found 4 bags worth of stuff that we didn't have need for anymore. And just to be able to see, people see videos of those people picking up stuff, and just, to me, when a community comes together and does really good stuff in a work setting, I'm just so proud of that team for just pulling together. And sometimes you have to set aside your personal agenda, and you're always going to have 1 or 2 of those bad eggs that won't set aside their personal thoughts and agenda. And maybe you have the conversation and say, look, we're going to have to, here's how it's going to be. You may want to disqualify yourself from this team. And it's always it's not that I want to have yes people on my team. It's I want to have people who agree to the direction we're going as a group, as a company. And when you have that alignment, and any book or any business book now tells you, if you don't have alignment, you don't have an effective team. And I'm really seeking out that alignment. And I think that was missing. That's the disconnect. When I look at that old team from Promise Keepers, I don't think they were connected to the accounting and finance team as they might have been or could have been. And they would have had a different opinion about us altogether.
Well, it's as simple as getting to your destination, right? As you're talking, I'm reminded of the importance of rowing in the same direction at the same tempo, right? And being mindful of what your neighbor is doing and making sure that you are in that alignment. Otherwise, it becomes a big mess, and you end up working a lot harder to make just a small percentage of progress that you could make if everyone is rowing together, if everyone is aiming towards the same target. So I absolutely agree with you there. The opposite of what you're talking about here, have you ever heard of the term, the tyranny of leadership?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
What comes to mind when you think about that term?
I think about leaders who make a decision in a vacuum. Yeah, and there's one thing about collaboration and having, trying to please everybody. That's not what I'm talking about in collaboration. I'm talking about a person who goes out and, gets intel from his team and says, if we change this process, what impact is it going to have on you? Now, have I been perfect at that? Absolutely not. But I think as we go about our lives as leaders, if we're just going to dictate orders and not develop relations with people, that's the other thing I think is, if we're just out there giving the appearance of building relationship, that kind of falseness of our approach is going to come crystal clear to people, because they're going to see through that nonsense, right? I believe in the tyranny of leadership is going to be, you're just barking orders and you want 100% adherence to what you're telling people to do. And sometimes I've been pretty apt in saying this a lot. Just because you think it doesn't make it right. Now, as an executive leader, I always caution myself, hey, just because I thought that it actually right. So I'll go to somebody and say, hey, tell me what you think. What happens if we work through this direction? I want to have that feedback to see where it's going to take us, because I think there's some good dialogue to come out there, and maybe we tweak the direction, because I don't have everything figured out. Honestly, I have to deal with details every day, but I'll tell you that my passion is a big picture vision and trying to get from point A to point B. And I'm an accounting an accountant by trade, so I'm going to do the things I need to do to help us get there, detail oriented or not. My passion is for more of that big picture stuff. But that doesn't mean, and doesn't relieve me of the responsibility of coming in and saying, I need to do my due diligence with my team. I want to illustrate this point. The person who replaced me at the forklift dealer, I was talking to a friend of mine who works there still, and that person told me that they only see their new CFO once every 2-3 weeks, because he does not come out of the office and engage people. Now, they're all used to me engaging people every day, having a joke or a laugh, pranking somebody. I don't know, just something to build because without relationship, people are not going to follow you because they don't know your heart. I mean, that has got to be foundational. I want people to know my heart. I've been fond of saying that to my new team. I said, you guys know where my heart is on this. And it's because I'm purposeful and intentional in sharing that, so that they understand I'm not about being ego Jim. I'm about getting the right thing done for this organization, for this team. A leadership tyranny does not care about doing the right things for the organization or for the team. They only care about themselves.
I love that, Jim. I love the way that you put that. You strike me as someone who is a very effective leader as you lead from the middle. I'm sure you've heard of that concept
Yes.
as well, where you actually
Yeah.
jump into the thick of it with your team.
Yeah.
You're not barking orders from some corner office or some, city on a hill where all the leaders hang out. You're in it with them. You are experiencing the frustrations with them, and you're asking for collaboration. And because you have that relationship, they understand that your direction is not egocentric. Your direction is not self-gratifying. You're looking out for the best of the team. You're looking out for the best of the company because they know you as a leader. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's foundational to being a servant leader, honestly.
Absolutely. You're one of the most interesting guys that I've ever met. I just be honest with you. Chief financial officer, we were talking about how you serve as an adjunct professor at Metropolitan State University here in Denver, which is awesome. But then to layer on top of that, you also have had a thriving career as a football referee. How did you fall into that? And tell us a little bit about that.
Oh, sure. I think this was in the late 90s. We first moved to Colorado, and we got my daughter, oldest child, in soccer. And they were talking about a need for soccer referees. I didn't know anything about soccer. So I took the class. And, I did some soccer. I met a guy at Promise Keepers, honestly, who worked high school soccer. And I joined that team. And then I said, hey, I could probably do football since I know the process. So in 2000, I took the class for high school football officiating here in Colorado. And I haven't looked back. I took a year off in 2020 because I had a really bad back pains. What I found out was arthritic hips, and I have 2 new bionic hips, which is kind of cool.
Wow. You're like
changed my life for sure.
What's the $1 million man? That's you, man.
No, they were like 30,000 apiece. So you can call me the $60,000 man. So I just completed my 24th season. I have been a white hat, the referee, the main guy on the field, the guy who gets booed every time he announces a penalty. I think I've done the referee white hat position probably for more than 14 years, on and off for the first couple of years. I've been a crew chief for about a dozen years or so. Honestly, Carlos, I never thought I would see myself in this role. But, what's interesting is, when you're first up and coming, you're just grateful to get a varsity game. I worked a year before I got my first varsity game. And I remember I even told this to our signer. He and I were chatting one day here recently, this last season. And I said, hey, Steve, one time we were doing my second year, we were doing a scrimmage together, and you were telling your other buddies about this varsity game that opened up. And I started asking, I said, wow, where is that? Can I do that? And I said, you had such of a look of disdain where you're just a rookie, dude. What are you begging to do a varsity game? You have no business out here. And I remember that year I did my first varsity game was at Denver Public School Stadium. It was against TJ and Grandview. I don't know why. It just stands out in my mind. And I remember the white hat telling me, and I was a back judge, and he said, you're the rookie guy, right? And I said, yeah. He goes, I want you to stand with your toes on the goal line and keep your flag in your pocket. Now, everybody knows the game moves up and down the field, right? So I go, that makes no sense to me. So, kind of being rebellious like I am a little bit, I didn't stay on the goal line. And I at least flagged one of the kids for a little extracurricular activity after the play. I'm fond of saying on the microphone, shoving after shoving time was over. It's kind of a funny thing when I have the microphone. Yeah. Personal foul for late hit. Shoving after shoving time is over. So I flagged this kid for that. And, he was fine with the call. But I can remember how much I worked hard. I was a wing on the wings and the sideline for most of that time, first 10 years. And really worked hard at that craft. In 2013, I worked the state championship at Mile High Stadium. Such an incredible experience.
Wow.
A great crew to do that with. And I was kind of doing half on the wing, half at referee at that point in time. And I accepted a full-time role as a crew chief. I was subbing in for one guy who got hurt. And I've been a crew chief ever since. And, the lessons about business and leadership and developing people all dovetail into kind of that whole holistic. It's a melting pot or a mixing bowl of me trying to take all of what I've learned as a leader and put that together as a business leader, as a crew chief. I have so much enjoyed developing young officials now at 24 years, especially when I hit 20. You have a sense of, I know some guys will look up to you and say, what can I learn from this guy? And maybe they don't feel that way, but I'm going to impart some wisdom on it. And my approach, Carlos, when I first started doing football, it was old school. If you remember the old school type of football guys, they would tell you, don't drink water, and, you got to do all this stuff. You're going to be punished. And, they would make you feel worthless. Now, as a leader, I've never wanted to leave any of my staff after a kind of a corrective action conversation, laying in a heap in a corner. And that's the way these old school officials were when they would tell you screwed up. My approach has been, and always will be, I'd come over to an official and say, tell me what you saw. And let's talk about that a minute, and say, what do you think the rule application is, or what did your mechanic, tell you that we should be doing? And I would say something like this. The conversation would end, hey, next time you come across this situation, you might consider doing X, something different. That has been the way that I approach it. And it's been so very good for me. My last crew, and we switch every 3 years. Man, I'm so proud of these guys. Within a 2-year span, all of us had done our second state championship.
Oh, wow.
So I felt like we across, the metro area, we were one of the top crews. We were doing good, solid 5A games up here. We had some of the top schools that were in the playoffs this last year. And we did some of the top schools that were in the playoffs at other classifications. And I just really feel good about, the kind of product. And when I would run down the field on a change of possession after a punt, I would see 4 other guys go into their position, doing the things that we had talked about every single time for the last 3 years. And to watch and marvel at these guys do their craft. And to me, it's nothing I did. It's just I put the vision in their head and say, here's what the mechanic says. Let's look like we're confident in what we're doing, because if we're in the right place, nobody can really argue with the call. They might not like it, but they can't argue because we were in the right place or using the right mechanics to do that. I've had some pretty good success. I've mentored a couple guys into the college official, but one in particular I'm really, really proud of. He's just such a great friend. When I first met him, he was a teacher at one of the high schools here in town. And it did have a little bit of a speech impediment. And I remember in his first couple of years, he's on my crew. So we signed up and did a game at one of the bigger 5A schools, a freshman JV combo. And I've done this to guys in the past, and they will tell you that they were scared, but they were glad they had that opportunity. And I said to him, look, dude, I'm going to take your spot on the wing. You're going to take mine as the white hat today. And, he kind of got flustered, and he says, well, what if we have to talk to a coach? And I said, look, I'll be right there with you. I'll walk through the coach's conference. I'll do everything with you. And I'll walk through with that. When he blew his whistle for that kickoff, he was like a totally different person. He was an outstanding official. I'd never watched him. He was my back judge. I had never watched him perform in a game, but I kept my eye on him just so I could give him some feedback. Honestly, man, he was so good. I think maybe a year or two later, he was at a camp or a college camp, and he got picked up to do a couple college games. The very next fall or spring, he called me on Father's Day, and he said, Jim, I just want to tell you, I got picked up to do half of his schedule in the Big Sky Conference, which is University of Northern Colorado, Montana State, places like that. So, kind of an FCS type of school, And I was like, wow. And he was just so thankful. He says, I can't believe what you've done for me, and it means so much. And I go, it's not me. I gave you the opportunity to succeed, and you took that opportunity and you made it yours. And the next year he calls me. I got a full not scholarship, but I got a full ride to the Western Athletic Conference. The next year he calls me and he says, hey, just want you to know I'm going to be a Pac-12 official next year. And that was the last year the Pac-12 was in. And I recorded most of his games because, I'm usually going to church on Saturday night. And I would come home and I'd watch those games, and he was like a field judge or side, I can't remember which one, but he was so smooth out there. Of course, when the Pac-12 dissolved this last season, he got picked up by the American Conference. He said, he told me what games are going to be on TV, and so I'd record them and watch them. Really good stuff. Then he called me and he texted me. He said, hey, I'm going to work the Air Force game. Now, I've wanted to go to an academy game ever since I moved to Colorado in 96. He goes, are you interested in being my guest? And I go, are you kidding me? Absolutely. So I got a chance to watch my one of my favorite officials, one of my friends, work a big time college football game in person. I'm so proud of this guy. He is just, I don't know. He's absolutely amazing on the field, just so smooth. His mechanics are so great. I told him after, and then he worked the Army Navy game. I told him, I said, look, I know you have to be on track for the NFL. I said, I will be at any stadium to watch you in your first NFL game because I believe you're going to be there. You're so good at what you do. And the funny thing about this is, Carlos, after I had hip replacement, I thought I was done with football. My bride tells me, what are you going to do? You feel better? You're going to go back and do football? And I said, I don't know. She said, you're not done mentoring young officials. I think you need to go back. And what, for your spouse to affirm the things that you're about, how awesome is that, dude?
That's amazing.
It was so humbling, and I've enjoyed it. One of my best friends, who's my umpire, my crew, I met him that year. We were doing a scrimmage out east on the eastern part of the metro area, and he goes, I think I'm on your crew. And that was his kind of break-in year, and then next year he was full-time for me. He has, this guy, I can't ask for, a better person than I have as a friend. I'm pretty sure we're going to talk about this, but, as I've told you before, I lost my son to suicide last year in May. And my umpire, he arranged for us as a crew to be able to read a suicide awareness announcement before every football game that we did this last season in 24. And he got pins for all of us to wear for suicide awareness.
No, wow.
He spearheaded that effort. I saw him the day after Justin took his life. I had just come out of the gym. I needed to do something. And I remember walking out, or I was on the treadmill one time and I just doubled over and just crying. I came out to my car, and next thing you know, he's standing next to me, and I'm getting ready for the season, so my workout's a little more intense than it is on the off right now in the off season. And I was just drenched in sweat. And he goes, he says, "Get out of your car. I'm going to give you a hug." And I said, "Dude, I'm just like, I am gross." He goes, "I don't care. I'm about to go do yoga. I'm going to get gross." So, he knew how to come alongside of me. Just a phenomenal. And Carlos, when you do football, you have this kinship with these guys that it just transcends everything. And part of it is that's a good follower of helping a leader be a leader, but it's just that building a relationship with him. We have radios. We'll say stupid things on the radios too. Guy talk, stupid things, I won't mention things, but it was kind of stupid things. And we have such a kinship. I love these other four guys that I worked with last year. They were so amazing. I don't know. That's a long answer to the question you asked me, but my passion, again, it goes back into this leadership. How can Jim continually to tweak that craft of being a leader and being a football official as a white hat crew chief has really helped me to do that.
I think one of the things that I'm hearing you say throughout your comments is that in your experience, you've really received probably as much as you've given to your teams across along the way. And certainly that could be a reflection of good leadership. If you're seeing reciprocation there, it's probably because you're a good leader. As you talk about your journey with your son, Jim, I can't help but think how, an event of that magnitude may impact you at a lot of different levels in your existence, certainly spiritually, professionally, relationally. It impacts every aspect of your life. Would you mind sharing with us more about that experience? Tell us about Justin, first of all, who he was and what you celebrate today about him. And then, how you're navigating this journey today with your family.
Yeah, and I'll tell you and your audience, there's something I'll tear up about, and I make no apologies for it. So, Justin was 21 years old. He had just completed his last semester of his junior year at University of Northern Colorado in Greeley. We were going up to get him after his last final, and we were knocking at his door. He couldn't get in. The university police and the dorm staff there were kind of not really receptive, even though we were telling him we were concerned about his health and his mental health. They weren't really receptive to open the door. And finally, after, about an hour, they breached his door, said, "Oh, he's not in here." And his shoes were right there by the door, and his bathroom door's closed. And I said, "Bathroom door's shut." They breached that door, and there he was hanging on his towel rack right in front of me.
Mm.
When you see that, you can't unsee it.
Yeah.
And I will tell you that image haunts me so much, because my son was in pain, that his mind was not right, and he ultimately chose to take his life. But from a lessons learned thing, I will tell you this, man. You never know what's going on behind a person's life. Let me give you this context. They tell us that grief is like having broken ribs. On the outside, you look fine, but on the inside, you can't breathe. And that is absolutely true. I think anybody that's going through some mental health stuff, sometimes you cannot see. They look fine on the outside, but inside they can't breathe. I know that was my kid. He was such a fun kid. He would try to, his sense of humor was so quirky. He would say things, he would do the opposite things. I don't know, he grew up doing opposite day. So all of his jokes were something about opposite day. I had a conversation with him in the last year, and I said, hey, bud, I said, you remember us playing a game when you were a kid on the old PS2s, which were all plug-ins? And I said, all of a sudden, I thought you got irritated at me and you unplugged my controller. And he goes, no, I just thought you were winning. I didn't want to see. So musically, this kid was so talented. My goodness. He took an AP music theory class in high school. He went to Eagle Crest High School. He could compose such great music. At his funeral service, his older sister and brother-in-law put a slideshow together that was undervamped by a composition that he did. And there was that first year after he took that class and learned how to compose music that we didn't get Mother's Day or birthday cards. We got compositions, and I will treasure those forever. He was one of two 4-year lettermen at Eagle Crest in the band. Loved playing the trombone, was a section leader, was in leadership, just, went through COVID, so I didn't get to see him march the last 2 years. But he was absolutely phenomenal in his ability to be musically gifted. And on the other hand, here's the other thing about him. He could do these massive calculus problems and physics. One day in high school, he says, "Hey, can you help me with this calculus problem I have?" And I looked at it and I go, "Yeah, Justin, I haven't done that since like 1980. I don't think I could be any help to you." And he's looking at me, he goes, "Yeah, but you're really smart." And I go, "Not as smart as you are." And I mean, he had this on one side of his brain, he was so, analytical. And on the other side, he could create. One of my favorite things that he would do at Christmas time, we were riding in the car, and he'd always have his GarageBand app on his iPhone, and he would constantly play music on it. If we did everything on in the car, he would start to play Christmas songs in minor keys just to irritate his mom. And I thought, and she go, "Justin, stop that." And I was sitting there just laughing my head off, because it's part of his quirky sense of humor. He would just compose things and do stuff like that. It was so hilarious. Honestly, I loved the fact that he could do all that stuff. And he was a meteorology major and a Chinese minor. I know those two don't go together, but in 2023, we left on Thanksgiving Day to go to China to complete our third adoption of an orphan in China. It did not complete, but we stayed in a Marriott next to a 7-story mall, and there was a game room up there, and he had researched this game that's only available in China, and he went up and played that thing for hours. It was a musical game.
Oh,
and
wow.
had videos of him doing that. And to me, when I think about him doing the stuff that he just absolutely loved, I have such great memories of that. But I know he was tormented day in and day out by stuff that was, anxiety and other issues that just bothered him. He felt like he couldn't make friends. He couldn't step into a conversation. I don't know. I think it's just people were always wanting to talk to him. If you went to his funeral service and you heard his fellow students talk about him, he was beloved.
Yeah.
But he just never
Yeah.
felt that.
Hmm.
And so what have I learned as a leader? You never know what's going on behind the scenes with somebody. Somebody might
Sure.
be struggling and that, hey, I'm thinking about you today, or how are you doing? Is there anything I can come alongside you? Those questions and really meaning them, Carlos, those are the things that I've learned to do with my team and others around me, because you never know what's going on in a person's heart. Never know. And I feel like I need to lean into people a lot more. And I think learning to make allowances from when people make mistakes is the big thing, because there's a learning opportunity there as well. Maybe have a conversation with them and say, how can we, move through this and set you up for not making the same mistake, and make it a team effort to do that. But I've learned to lean into people and to care that much more about it. I grew up as an only kid. I was pretty insulated most of my life until I had 6 children. I'm a little more, I think, engaged with folks than I was as a teenager or as a young kid. I've really learned those things to be that much more engaged with people, that whether I lead them directly or indirectly. Because then as a CFO role, people look to you and they want to know and know that the company is run, well in its finances. And I try to, establish that. I'm pretty transparent about everything. And, it's just caring about people. I can't remember the guy's author, and I meant to look this up before our conversation, but there's a book out there called The Heart-Led Leader. And this is a guy who has extreme dyslexia, grew up in upstate New York, now lives down in Castle Rock. Wrote several books on this, and he's been a speaker at the Colorado CPA Society. It's The Heart-Led Leader. When I read that book, it was life-changing for me as a leader. I think between him and Maxwell, Lencioni, with the 5 functions of a dysfunctional team or something like that, and a couple other authors. I think that guy who wrote Jocko Willem, who wrote Extreme Ownership. Those guys have all impacted me as a leader for some of the things they've written. But I've taken the Heart-Led Leader, some of those concepts, and really applied those to my life as an executive leader.
Well, Jim, thanks so much for sharing with us about your son. He sounds like an exceptional human being. Tell us about your other family members. I know you have several other children. What are they like?
Yeah, it's fun. I mean, I'm a little cut up, right? So, because you've known me for a long time. When you meet people, guys especially, they kind of try to size you up, and they'll say, how many children you have, and I'll say 6, and they'll go, what? Are they all by the same woman? I'll say, before I say the answer, that I have 2 adopted from China. So, but I'll say to them, no, 4 of them are from the same woman. The other 2 are from some random Chinese women. And so I'm thinking, if you're gonna break, some social cue about asking if they're all from the same woman, I'm gonna punish you a little bit. You got to pay the price, don't you?
That is
I worked
hilarious.
on our oldest is mid-30s. She and her little younger brother, he's gonna be 32 in the first part of February. They were with us when we moved to Colorado. Just great people. My 32-year-old, almost 32-year-old, is on the autism spectrum. I'm so proud of this young man. He gets to school, or gets to work every day, takes the bus, has worked at Goodwill for he's on his 11th year, and just is such an exceptional young man. He really advocates for others who are special needs at the store. He's embraced he calls it a disability. I don't know if it's a disability, but I remember at Justin's funeral, he got up and he said, hey, my name's Taylor. I'm the older brother, and I'm neurodivergent. And that's just one of the things that he does. And just to me, for him to be on the autism spectrum and to really embrace that disability and make it the best. He's lived on his own for almost 10 years.
Oh, wow.
I'm just so proud of him.
Yeah.
My oldest has given us 3 grandchildren. They're quite rowdy at times, but they're fun. I enjoy having them when they come over to our house. I have a fabulous son-in-law, honestly. That guy, he's a marketing guy. and he'll tell me new concepts in marketing. It makes my head spin. I think I know a lot about business, but he's quite the cut up, and him and I just love him to death. He's truly a gift from God to our family and to his wife and his family. My next oldest, he's going to be 26 in March. He's a forklift technician at where I used to work. Just a good, solid young man. He made some kind of bad decisions in high school, not terrible ones, but not some healthy ones. Like, when you get your license in Colorado, you're supposed to not have somebody riding in the car with you,
Right.
and then the photo radar would show you'd have somebody in the car with you. And that photo radar would come to me because I'm the owner of the car. I go, so dude, what are you doing here? But he's had enough. One of my favorite stories, Keelan, if you tune into this later, I apologize. I remember I went for jury duty. This is when he was like 17, 18 years old down in Arapahoe County. And I heard this clearing of throat, and I turn around, I see him there. And then I see his name up on the board for going to court that day. I go, what the heck? So I get seated in the jury waiting room, and I text him. I said, so you're at the courthouse today. And I don't think he expected me to be there, although I had my jury summons, to my testimony. I had my jury summons sitting on the couch, so he knew, or on the table. I knew he knew that I had jury duty that day. So we talked about that. He ended up, with some extra points on his license for some, stupid things that he did as a driver. But he's, honestly, I think he's really learned some things, and he's an exceptional young man. I should talk about my daughter, just a great mom, homeschools her children, just so patient with her kids. I'm really proud of her. My son Keelan, he's just such he's like a leader in for all the technicians, just super, super good, very focused. I mean, when you think about a 26-year-old and some of the mentality that we have about young folks today, he really exhibits the kind of qualities I would want in a lead technician, just because he's like more of an older soul. He got married in 23, just a wonderful young lady. For a son-in-law and a daughter-in-law, we are so blessed by what God has brought into our lives. We're so, so blessed. Phenomenal young lady. Of course, Justin was the youngest of our bio kids. And then in 2012, I graduated from the University of Denver with an MBA. And part of that program is that we went overseas for a global business trip. We went to Asia. So I went to Hong Kong, China, Vietnam. DU is really big on social capital, social equity programs. And so we spent a day in Saigon. We spent a day at an orphanage and had 160 some kids come out. And we got a chance to love on those kids for a day. Carlos, it was just heartbreaking,
Yes, I can't imagine.
It's heartbreaking. And I took pictures, and, Joyce says, hey, you should bring one of that girl. There's a little picture of me with a little girl who just hung on to me most of the day. This is a sweet little kid, probably at that time 3 or 4. And Joyce said, you should bring her home with you. And, I was home, and we were home a week. I was home a week, and we got to talking one night, and we felt like God had given us a identical vision for international adoption. Identical. Now, I'm going to tell you, I've been married 38 and a half years, and I've never, been on, exact details with my wife ever, other than this thing, because we each have our different way of going about things. It's not a bad thing. I think it's good to have that little bit of friction to get to the right answer. But for this thing, we were totally on board with it. And she started searching out Vietnamese. You could not, and you still can't adopt in Vietnam because they're not Hague compliant, which is a Congress that governs kind of international adoptions. And so she started looking in Colorado for other Asian countries, and right up the road from Denver is Berthoud, Colorado. It's a little small town, and our agency was up there. She started searching their website, and there was this little picture of this little tiny girl standing next to a tree with the saddest face ever. And when we both saw that picture, we were instantly smitten with that one young lady. And it was a year process, and we brought her home in 2013. Yeah, 2013. She has grown. She's got a rare disease for girls, and she will never grow above 4'7". And so she's small, but so funny, so loving, so kind, so genuine. I mean, I love her to death. I think one time her mother said to her, "On that string, I think your dad's tied to that string. It's around your finger." So, because I don't know anything I would do for her. And then a year later, we went and got a young man, and by the way, she was 4 when we got her. She's now 15, going to be 16 in February.
Wow.
Taken out, and she plays in the marching band at Crest, and
Oh, I love it.
she
Just
wanted her
like Big
brother
Brother, huh?
She
Yeah.
wanted her brother, and they were close. They were super close. It broke her heart when the day that we told her about Justin. She carries a lot of pain. If I could put a plug in, Carlos, for this, or anybody else, and for this, there's a place called Judy's House, and it's for teens and young kids who have lost a significant person in their life. And they help do some counseling and group therapy for them. And the parents, the caregivers that are involved also get the same kind of care. And that's been a remarkable program for us. We're going to start week 6 this week with them out of 10. It's just been excellent for her. It's been excellent for us. Highly recommend anybody that's got a family trauma, death on a family member like that with a teenager or small children involved. Highly recommend that program. They are just great people. They're so caring. Really make you think about some stuff and help you get on the road to moving through grief. We don't move on from grief. We move through grief. Really great stuff. So I mentioned that parenthetically.
Well, thank you for that. We'll be sure and add a link to that as well.
Yeah. And here, so just great things. And, a year later or 2 years later, we went and got our second adopted kid. He was 10 or 11 when we got him. He had been taken back to the orphanage at age 10. Such trauma in his life. Just there were some days that were so difficult from the pit of hell, but we knew that God had called us to bring this young man home. And, for the last 3.5 years, he's worked at McDonald's. He's he's an assistant manager there, just up the road from us, and just has really working through the trauma in his life. And so again, when I talk about losing a son, what does it make me as a leader? I mean, how does that impact it? My Chinese adopted son, he has a lot of stuff going on in his life. He will talk smack to you, but I think it's all based in this, I got to feel better about myself. He has such poor self-esteem. And I think when we look at behind what's going on in a person's life, instead of the stuff that we see in front of us, and we really see what makes that person tick, we're going to lean into them and really help him. And there have been a few guys at our church, the former youth pastor we had, really leaned into him and helped him just grow and develop as a young man. I'm just so thankful for guys who have reached into his life. And the other day he come out and he says, "Hey, I'm playing with this other pastor. He's now in Minnesota." Because I'm playing a game online with him, and they were having great conversation and stuff. And so, we really have, as leaders, we have to think about what's going on in people's lives. This whole adage about separating your work life from your home life, that's just pure garbage, honestly, man. Because as well as I do, if you have a fight with your wife before you head off to work, that's going to live in your spirit part of the day. Or if you get torched at work for something, that's going to live when you get home. You can't separate these two. That's just total hogwash. And I think we have to be, as leaders, we have to ferret out that stuff and help that person move forward and say, "Look, I need the best from you today. I understand what's going on, but I need the best from you today. What can I do to come alongside you and help you get there?" And I think that's what an extraordinary leader should be about. So.
Well, and I'm so glad you say that, because anymore, right, you really can't make the separation between your job and your life, particularly when most Americans are working out of their home, right? Post-COVID, many people are working remotely. And so it's a tall ask to set that expectation for people that, they should leave their life, their faith, their emotions at the door when they enter the workplace. So I'm glad that you said that. I have a couple of questions that I'd love your heartfelt, and I know you'll give it to us, your heartfelt response on.
Sure.
The first is, I admire your family structure, and I admire your approach and philosophy about family, particularly, the fact that you went out and adopted 2 children internationally is incredible. It's so inspiring. I hope others watching this podcast would be inspired to do so. There are so many children out there that, really do deserve great homes, great parents, right? That deserve the love that they may not experience otherwise. What advice would you give to family members, just taking all of that into consideration, Jim? What advice would you give to maybe family members who have a sense that maybe one of their loved ones are struggling with mental health, or are struggling with some sort of heavy weight on their shoulders? You talked about earlier just being aware of the fact that you may not know what somebody is going through, right? But what
Sure.
advice would you give to these family members? How should they respond to those situations?
That's a great question. Yeah, let me ask you, how many orphans do you think there are in the world?
Oh my
First of all,
gosh. I have
care to
no
venture a
idea.
guess? 60 million.
16 billion.
60 million. That's a lot of kids.
That's a ton.
You know, here's what I would say, and we tried as much as we can. We had a scare with Justin in the middle of February. Mom went up and got him, couldn't get him. He wouldn't answer his door. We finally got the dorm people to say that they were housekeeping, and he answered, and he was kind of upset. But he came home for the weekend. It seemed like he was in a better place when he left, when we took him back. We even asked him if he wanted to go back or if he just needed to be at home for a while and be out of school. Ever conscious about spending money for the education. He goes, I don't want to waste Dad's money. And we said, it's okay. It's fine. If you need a break, let's do it. And unfortunately, he made that wrong decision. It made him, he stopped going to class. We did find that out to his funeral, and one of his professors was at the funeral service and told us that he was surprised that Justin had not been going to class. We go, what? And the university they did not care enough to tell us. Now, I realize there's some rules. He's an 18-year-old. But, there's so many things that just tick me off about, that whole thing. I got a family member who's, in crisis, and you won't let me know anything about him going to class, or you won't breach his door. I'm telling, if that's the one thing I'm angry about, that is the one thing. That is the one thing. They were indifferent about his death.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, they gave me his degree posthumously, but so what? I got a piece of paper that says he's got a bachelor's degree, and do I really care? Well, I paid a bunch of money for it, but at the end of the day, I'd rather have my son.
Right.
I think you really need to be connected as a parent. I'm going to tell you this. This is really cool. When we were going through the parenting classes for required for adoption, we took a couple of classes, and one was called the Connected Parent. And I will tell you, I wish I had a chance to do over again with my other kids, because it's a different style of parenting. It's you let natural consequences actually take care of a situation, a behavioral issue, or whatever, or this bad decision, and you can't be a helicopter person. But the concept is that you're totally connected with your kid. You're not in their business all the time, but you're connected with them. It's being a heart-led parent and trying to do the best that you can with knowing that your kid is struggling with some stuff, or a family member is struggling with some stuff. From the generation that, a lot of people just didn't even talk about suicide. I'm born in the 60s, and, had an uncle that took his life, but nobody ever really talked about stuff like that. Joy and I are very vocal about how can we help somebody not go through the same pain that we're going through every day. And so I'll be very open about my story with Justin, because I don't want another parent to have to go through what I'm going through on a daily basis. But, you just got to be connected. You got to stay with them. You got to, maybe they don't want to talk about it, but, give them a situation where, hey, let's just go on a walk. Let's go do something fun that they like to do, and get them to open up about something, and just be connected with them. I think in today's world, we're so busy, the concept that everybody should work 50, 60 hours, to me, that's nonsense. Let's put some time in for family. Let's make sure that we make them a priority. Each one of those family members are gifts to us. Let's make sure we make them a priority, and not leave them as casualties of our career, because they've been given to us to be the steward and shepherd, and give them, prepare them for adulthood. Have I been perfect at that? Absolutely not. I've screwed up so much as a parent, and I can only ask for God's grace for my kids now as an adult. But it wasn't until I took that class on connected parenting that I really felt like it was life changing for me, because in my generation, we just picked up what our parents did, and obviously that stuff wasn't the best at all, or not even close to being the best. And kind of like my officiating story, when those old school officials would get on you. I don't know, Carlos. It's a tough thing. I think being able to talk about mental health with them, talk about what should we do. We honestly believe Justin was on the spectrum as well. We were going to have him tested. That's this summer. And we had Joy had a couple conversations by text with him. He was a little combative about stuff. The last night that she actually had text with them. And it was kind of atypical for him. And I think in his mind, he had resolved that he was going to do this. And just so heartbreaking for us. So.
Well, Jim, I think the advice that you provide about being connected is pretty profound, because connection happens more than just, hey, let's have a conversation, or let's share a text string together, right? It actually takes it beyond that. And I love the example that you suggest, where maybe you take them out to do something that they really enjoy, and you actually spend some quality time, and you get them to open up. You get them to share with you how they feel. When I saw your post on social media about your son, I, to be quite honest with you, was reminded of one of my own children, my eldest, who is in the LGBTQ plus community, has gone through hardship their entire life, in terms of just feeling different, feeling like maybe they don't belong. They moved out to LA number of years back. They're very, very happy there, and I'm so excited for them. But when the reality of your son came out, they were the first person that I thought of, and I reached out to them. And I have to tell you, it was a sobering reminder that you need to be connected. You need to be present in your children's lives. Not just your children, but anyone, right? Any family member, any loved one, any person that you care about. If you care enough about them, then spend time with them. Get to know their struggles if they're willing to open up. And you have to sometimes just listen. We all have these opinions about young kids' lives. We see it ad nauseum, right, on social media, about how today's generation is lazy. They're this, they're that. But sometimes we just need to listen. We just need to reach out and just be a sounding board for them, and that's it. Not say anything in response, not give any advice, not be critical, but just listen. And that is great advice, man. Be connected. So I really appreciate you saying that. From a professional standpoint, Jim, what advice would you give? I mean, you certainly are such, gosh, to say you're multifaceted just doesn't do it justice, my man. You're like Shrek, and I mean that in a good way. Have you ever seen that movie Shrek?
Oh, yeah.
So
yeah,
you know that line where he tells Donkey, ogres are like layers, right? Or like onions. They have layers. You have layers about you, man, that you just go deeper and deeper and deeper. And I'm so grateful to have a friendship with you because of that, and just a human being that you are. But what advice would you offer to maybe young leaders, right, striving to develop a career, maybe as diverse as you, maybe someone who just, is as ambitious as you are, who not only wants to succeed professionally, they want to find, an extracurricular activity like refereeing that they can really excel in, and maybe give back to the community by serving in an education capacity, and then still be the super person that they need to be for their family. What advice would you give to them?
Oh, I think it's a great question. Thanks for asking that. And here's where I would, the couple of things that I would start off with. Today, we spend too much time texting. If I was working at a CPA firm again, I would say, and I know they're governed by budgets and time budgets and whatnot, but I would say, get out to meet that client. Learn. I mean, if you were a new if you're a new senior in charge of an audit engagement, go meet that client. Have that face-to-face conversation. Don't text them. If you're a new leader, if you want to be a new leader, don't be texting your staff. Get inside of their cubicle. Go to where they are. Learn who they are. Understand what makes them tick. Don't be thinking that you know everything, because I'm going to tell you, at 61 years old, I surely don't know everything. And I'm still learning things every single day about leadership and how to be a better leader. Be present in their lives. And that doesn't mean using, social media to stay connected. That means being present. When I grew up, we didn't have cell phones. And I tell my kids, we had two phones in our house, and one was connected here and one was downstairs. And, we had to dial the phone. I will tell you this parenthetically, that, I've become quite addicted to the Perry Mason show. 58 season in 1958 right now, but they all call each other on the phone, or they'll show up and they'll be present in people's lives. There was something about that generation that knew how to connect with people, and it's not by text. It's not by, I'm going to drop you a note on social media. You have got to be present in somebody's life. If you want to have meaningful change in a person's life, you have to build that relationship. And it takes effort to be, as a leader, to build relationship, to build trust, so that they understand where your heart is and they will trust you walking through the fire. You know what I'm saying?
Well said, my friend. Well said.
Do you remember when the decision at PK was made for us to do those youth events, or one youth event, and we spent $2.5 million on that project, and had about 100,000 in the bank, and we didn't get any resources from that. Do you remember that?
I do.
And how for 18 months we struggled. We walked through the fire every single day trying to manage relationships with vendors, because we had zero money to pay for that.
Mm-hmm.
Fortunately, we had a large donor who came in and bailed us out after 18 months. But that's what I mean by walking through the fire. When you have to walk through a difficult thing, your staff needs to know that you care deeply about them, that you're going to be there to lead them through the fire. You're going to be the flashlight. You're going to be that emergency frog light that's up on the top of the wall. You're going to be there to help them feel secure about what's happening. And you don't have to be totally secure yourself. You can be insecure about those things, but they're looking to you to bring structure and order to chaos. And I think that's what a strong, effective leader is going to do. And if I was a young leader, I'd need to work on those skill sets now. Read everything you can. I mentioned the Extreme Ownership book. That guy tells you how to be. He's a former Navy SEAL. Tells you how to be a connected leader, one of those strong leaders that is totally bought in. The heart-led leader totally tells you how to be connected with your people. John Maxwell talks about being a level 5 leader. That level 1 leader is a positional leader. You will follow me because I'm the manager or I'm the supervisor. Well, you're not going to get much following from that. The moment they know that you care and that you're invested in them as people, that's when they start to reciprocate and say, I'm going to follow this guy wherever he's going to go. That's what I think.
Absolutely, man. Thank you. Well said. Jim, my man, thank you so much. Our conversation today has been very enriching, very inspiring, and certainly very informative in terms of getting to the next level from a leadership standpoint. So I really appreciate that.
Sure.
For those of you watching the podcast, you can connect with Jim on LinkedIn and Facebook by clicking on the links that we'll provide in the description of the podcast below. And we really appreciate you joining us today on Live, Lead, Legacy, where we explore stories and strategies that inspire leaders to leave a lasting legacy. If you found value in today's conversation, don't forget to subscribe, leave us a review, and share this episode with someone who could use a little inspiration on their leadership journey. Please be sure and show your support to the channel by visiting and purchasing an item at our store at newraincap.com. Your small gesture will go a very long way. For more insights, resources, and updates, follow us on all of your major social media outlets like TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Until next time, remember, live with intention, lead with impact, and build a legacy that matters.